but cannot aim and shoot them anymore due to arthritis and nerve degeneration. So when I moved in, he placed all the pew-pews in my hands should the need of self-defense arise. But should he see them out for any reason other than cleaning, there would be hell to raise. Being very well trained with pew-pews and having a sense of pride in defending my home, I took this responsibility very seriously. I always kept a pew-pew in a locked container in my nightstand with the key on a high shelf out of reach from the gremlins. One fateful day, I am out getting my grandfather food when I come home and my older cousin, his wife, and my grandfather are staring at a pew-pew on the table. It was my pew-pew that I kept in the lockbox. It was loaded and had a projectile chambered. I always keep a magazine in the lockbox but never loaded into the pew-pew. The lockbox was nowhere to be seen. My cousin claimed one of the children found the pew-pew and was playing with it. I was 100% certain that he either found the key or broke the lockbox open to get to it and load it. As a 6-year-old would not be able to reach a key I could barely grab, figure out what it was to, load my pew-pew, and chamber it. I tried my best to explain what my cousin had said was BS and that I never kept my pew-pews loaded in the house, but my cousin, who is a cop, scolded me on pew-pew safety and threatened to have me arrested if I didn't leave and hadn't arrested me yet because we're family. I was asked to collect my belongings and go back to my parents. My cousin had won, or so he thought. The next day, I apologized to Grandpa and explained to him there was no way one of the kids could have gotten the key. He agreed with me and he apologized, but he thought it best I move out until things cool down. But once they do, I would be welcome back home. Our relationship was a little fractured due to disinformation provided by my cousin. A month later, my grandfather died of a heart attack at 86. I was devastated. I was just beginning to get back into rhythm with him and rebuilding the trust that was somewhat shattered. To this day, I am still unsure of what kind of man he saw me as due to my cousin. Immediately, my cousin and his wife began sucking up to my dad. As they had sealed payday with Grandpa, it was time to move on to the uncle. This persisted for a month or two. I wouldn't stand for it. Then came time for the will. My grandfather's lawyer read out the will to me, my father, mother, and sister in our home. Our two cousins would be briefed individually on their share of the estate, per my grandparents' request. Then, the miracle line in the will comes to fruition. If anyone attempts to claim any part of the estate that is not assigned to them, they forfeit any assets they are supposed to receive and will be divided equally among the remaining family members. This was basically their way of saying, if you try to claim more than you're given, you get nothing. My father is supposed to receive every piece of physical property, aside from 2 or 3 items he set aside for me from my grandparents, as he is the only remaining child. The revenge. I hatched my plan. I called my cousin and told him all of Grandma's jewelry was to be donated to a charity auction. Grandma's collection of gems and medals was extensive to say the least, so a charity event wouldn't care if a few pieces didn't make it, right? It was a lure of gargantuan proportions that my greedy bastard of a cousin could not resist. He bit right on it and headed over to my grandparents' house ASAP, determined to snatch up as much as he could. A handful would send his kids to college. Regardless of what I said, the jewelry was never going to go to him anyways, so his actions were purely his own, since none of it was destined to be his. Coincidentally, Dad was on his way with the lawyer to my grandparents' house to overlook everything, formality stuff. According to my dad's testimony, my cousin had 3 shoeboxes worth of Grandma and Grandpa's jewelry piled on the kitchen counter, ready for loading into his car. My dad and the lawyer stood in the kitchen wondering why it was all there when my cousin walks in from my grandparents' bedroom with a 4th and final shoebox. The jig was up, and he put 2 and 2 together that I set him up, which was true, but there was no penalty against me for exploiting my cousin's greed, so he would F himself over. It's worth noting that between the 18 years from my aunt's death and my grandpa's death, their wealth had increased several times over, so my cousin felt cheated and expected to receive just as much as my sister and I, despite receiving half of his already and blowing it. Throughout this whole ordeal, his younger sister, my other cousin, has not had a problem at all and is still weeping over Grandpa's death like the rest of us. However, just like that, my cousin lost enough money in the course of 30 minutes that made him contemplate his sanity over greed. My cousin's bee of a wife apparently filed for divorce a few weeks later. We haven't heard from him in nearly 6 years, as he is all but disgraced now. You can call this a fairy tale ending, and on this particular part of the story, it somewhat is. There was a massive lawsuit by an unknown family member involving the IRS and FBI later on. But honestly, I would rather have my grandparents. Leave comments if you want the other part of the story, but it's not really a revenge story. Can you imagine the deer in the headlights look that the cousin would have had, walking into the kitchen with a box of jewelry and seeing everyone standing there right beside the other boxes knowing exactly what's going on? That would have been wonderful to see. Now, OP mentioned that you could comment if you wanted to hear more of the story. Apparently, enough people in the comment section said they did, and so OP wrote out something pretty short in the comment section, but I believe it summarizes the story. It says, "So the other part consists of my dad's cousin, the son of my grandfather's brother, Joseph, who is the same age as my dad. For decades, my dad, my grandfather, and Joseph ran my grandfather's business in tandem. At the time of my grandfather's death, my dad owned 50% of the business, with my grandpa owning the other 50%. When he passed, the will stated that my dad would receive half of my grandpa's share, and Joseph would get the other half, ending with 75% to my dad and 25% to Joseph. Joseph married this Swedish woman whose family was filthy rich, far wealthier than my own family. Joseph wanted to buy out my dad in the company using his wife's fortune. So he did. Joseph tried to pay my dad into an account in my dad's name that was tied to the business, which would be classified as company property once he had 100% ownership. Essentially, recycling the money back to himself, getting the business for free. It was something along those lines, very similar. Like I said, I don't speak this type of business law. This would have left the entire family dead in the water, as several years ago, my grandparents' house was tied into the business as a liquidable asset, should the company experience hardship. So the house would have been his and everything inside except for the things that were named. My dad was halfway through signing documents when he caught this and called it off, but Joseph tried to take my dad to court since he signed about half the documents. My dad probably would have lost, to be honest, but he claimed fraud on some technicality in the documents and was reinstated and given a double jeopardy type immunity from Joseph. He hired a PI and found out that Joseph had like $20 to his name on all accounts to him and reported him to the IRS, and they believed he has laundered millions out of the US to his wife's family, and the FBI has been on the case for a while. Not so much revenge, but a whole bunch of BS where we almost lost a bunch of stuff to a snake in our garden. Unfortunately, a lot of times when we hear stories like this, family doesn't seem to matter anymore when it comes to substantial amounts of money. It's a really sad situation, and one that we need to protect ourselves from. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from Functional Psychopath. Reported our ex to the IRS and finally got paid. Let's jump right in. So in 2018, my wife and I ended a relationship we had with our live-in girlfriend at the time. We had lived together for 4 years and things were great for 3.5 of those years. The last 6 months were hell. The downhill slide. I remember the day as if it was yesterday. My wife and girlfriend had just come back from a girl's day of spa treatment and getting haircuts. Girlfriend had beautiful red hair, and up to this point, none of the redhead stereotypes that go along with it. After her haircut, things changed. They went a full 180 degrees, and she went crazy. It started with little things like not taking care of her hygiene and arguing with children over video games. Yes, literally, arguing over a game called Viva Pinata. It escalated into being aggressive with my wife and myself. Now, one thing we've always held while having a relationship like this is that everyone is equal, absolutely equal. And it eventually came out that girlfriend thought she was more attractive than wife, which, while arguably true, still did not change the fact that everyone must remain equal. One Friday, she tells us she's going to visit her mom. Her mom was a special kind of woman that accepted our lifestyle and overall was good to us and our kids. However, she did have a bad habit of drugs, cheating on her husband, and overall self-sabotage behavior. When girlfriend comes home, she tells us of rule changes and that she signed up for a page called whatsyourprice.com. To explain this site, you either get paid to go on dates or pay to go on dates. There's a word in the English language for this kind of thing, but even that wasn't a deal breaker. However, we did break up before she actually accepted any dates. The next day, we found drugs, not weed, not shrooms, as we are 420